Welcome, you're on The Fringe Show. I'm your host, Tatiana Zalan, and I go live every Friday at 2 p.m. Dubai time. The Fringe is about our future, art, technology, science, society, economy. I help you to navigate the rapidly changing world and so that you can take advantage of the opportunities in this uncertain future. In my presentations, in my shows, I very often talk about Web3, metaverse, I talk about art. And today the focus is on art and really how fine art becomes intertwined with AI tools, with AI software that we have now. AI tools are now capable of generating original images from very simple text prompts. And I'll share some of my experience with that as well. AI models are trained on really very vast data sets so that they can recognize patterns in the data and learn to replicate. So today, I really would like to explore what works are being created with AI. How helpful is AI for creators? What ethical and legal issues does this rise? And how much art is AI-generated art? Before we go any further, as usual, all the views that are expressed here are my own. They do not represent the official views of the organizations and employers I'm associated with. The Fringe Show is for educational purposes only. It's not investment advice in any shape or form. And I think before we, as we go along, I want to show you a couple of slides. Let me maybe start with this. Let me see. Okay, so what are we seeing here? Well, it's actually my own creation. I just tried that yesterday. It took me maybe an hour to understand the basics, almost like a theory behind how it works. And then I tried my hand at creating a few images. It literally takes a few minutes to create an image. There is a process there, of course, and that has been done with Mid-Journey. That's one of the software tools that I was using. If you, on my left here, I see, well, you will probably see that too, a young girl in a party dress in the Claude Monet style. And on the right, you'll see a bowl of fruit with maybe some flowers here, some vegetables maybe as well. And I tried to imitate, with the help of AI, of course, the works of Cézanne. From now, you see that I'm really interested in Impressionists and the Post-Impressionists. That's indeed one of the art movements that I do relate to a lot. Richard, my husband, the better half, the co-founder of Vernissage, was a little bit more adventurous. And if I show you this picture, this image, you'll probably guess very quickly what this is coming from. And that's of course, Salvador Dali. And then that's an image created with lots of sand and clouds and, of course, lots of surrealistic landscapes and humans and clouds and sand. What are some other tools? Let's have a look a little bit at the background. What happened when this happened, and the companies that are behind AI-generated art. I should say that that's probably a very new phenomenon. When I heard about it was probably early 2021, when there were some of these kind of tools that are based on deep learning, machine learning, capable of generating images from these simple text prompts began to appear. They effectively extended our human imagination. What are some of the companies involved? OpenAI is there, Google is there, Facebook, although not all of these companies are offering their software tools to the public as yet. And then there is an open source field, a space where a lot of smaller companies like Mid-Journey that are used to create this so-called art are appearing. In the early October this year, Microsoft also announced that they would be releasing AI-generated art tools, but they haven't done it yet. There were a range of opinions that you can hear. Some techno-utopians would say AI-generated art, that it provides democratization of art for the masses. The cynics amongst us would also say it's copying human artists and threatening to end their career. But whatever you might think about it, it's clear that AI is here. You want it or you don't want it, and its potential has only just begun to be explored. What I want to do now is to show you another piece that was an award-creating piece by a gentleman, an artist called Jason McCallan. It won. He submitted 3 images for the competition, and he said it took him more than 80 hours to come up with this image. The reactions to that creation, award-winning piece, were very, very different. Some people say, and I'll just quote them, "This sucks for the exact same reason we don't let robots participate in the Olympics." That's according to one Twitter user. And the second Twitter user said, "Well, this is the literal definition of pressed a few buttons to make a digital art piece. AI artwork is banana taped to the wall of the digital world right now." Well, as I just said, Jason Allen probably doesn't think that way, because it took him more than 80 hours to come up with the final creation. First, he played around with phrasing that led Midjourney to generate images of women in frilly dresses and space helmets, if you look very closely. He was also trying to match up Victorian-style costumes with space themes, and over time, with many slight tweaks here and there to the written prompt. He tried to manipulate a little bit of color, a little bit of lighting. He created 900 iterations, and that led to the final 3 images. He cleaned up these iterations in Photoshop, because AI is only as good as the data that's been supplied into it. For example, on one of the women, there was no head, so he had to add a head. Then he ran the images through another piece of software called Gigapixel to improve the resolution of art, and had the images printed in the end on canvas at a local print shop. To him, to Jason Allen, the creator, it's avant-garde, it's a new art movement. And to his critics, he also had something to say. It comes from a place of denial, he says. Up until now, many were convinced that AI could never be as good as humans when creating art pieces, and now they've proven wrong. It would be better if they, and by they he means his critics, didn't deny the power available to them. Now, let's have a look how exactly it happens, how this text-to-image works, and what are the companies behind that and the tech behind it. These tools can create all kinds of images within just a few seconds, and currently they're used from anything from personal amusement to commercial users. So for commercial use cases, you can also use it. And in fact, you can explore, if you're a creator, if you're, say, designer, interior designer, you can have very cheaply and very quickly an idea of how a piece or a piece of design could look like. And it really, literally being generated in minutes. So for exploration purposes, I think it can work quite well. Then you use words, and these words evoke the works of many artists. You don't have to do it, but you can. You can use words such as in style of or by, just like I did, and then added the artist's name, like Paul Cézanne or Claude Monet. There are tools like OpenAI's DALL-E system. Then there is Stable Diffusion, that's Stability AI. Google's Imagen has not been released yet, and Midjourney. Stable Diffusion is a very well-funded firm. They recently raised something like $100 million in funding, and DALL-E raised $1 billion to date. So that's very well-funded too. And the text-generating model, their text-generating model is known as GPT-3, and that was also developed by OpenAI. Who can access these tools? Well, if you are after Midjourney, you can access that via Discord. It's in beta right now, and you can try your hand at that. DALL-E requires an invitation, and Imogen, as I mentioned, has not been open to the public as yet. For any one of these systems to ingest your word and spit out the image, so to speak, it must be trained on mountains and mountains of data. This includes billions of images that are scraped all over the internet and paired with written descriptions. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. And one point of contention, where are these images coming from? Well, obviously data sets. And how are these data sets created? Well, some services, including OpenAI's DALL-E system, they don't disclose the datasets behind their systems. Stable Diffusion by Stability AI are clear about their origins. Stable Diffusion is trained on a vast dataset that it mines for patterns and learns to replicate. The core of the training data for that is a huge dataset, 5.8 billion pairs of images and text tags. And they are known, this database in particular is known as Leon 5B, and all of that has been scraped from the public web. Lion B, by the way, is not maintained by Stability AI. It's a non-for-profit organization which is based in Germany. The key difference between Stable Diffusion and other AI generators is that Stable Diffusion is an open source and unfiltered image generation, and that's free to use for anyone who has a decent computer and just a little bit of technical know-how. You don't need much. The model was only released publicly in August 2022, but already its influence has spread very quietly and rapidly. It has been embraced by the AI art community and decried by many traditional artists. It has been picked apart and worried over. And it is precisely this openness that will allow Stable Diffusion to improve faster than its rivals. If you check out the Stable Diffusion subreddit, and as you know, there are subreddits for almost anything in the world, including for Midjourney, I believe, as well. You can see users not only sharing their favorite image prompts, but coming up with new use cases for the program and also integrating it with already established tools. And another picture, another image that I want to show you, which is called Bernie Sanders in a Mad Max movie that doesn't exist. So that's what Bernie Sanders looks like. Lighting has been fixed, and he was supposed to be in the Mad Max movie. Symmetrical features, something again a little bit surrealistic, a world that doesn't exist, right? Now, another fine artist. Let me click on the next picture. Sorry. That's Erin Hansen. She's a well-known American artist in the impressionistic style. And if you can see these two pictures, on the left from me is a picture that's her own, the original, and then created by AI has been given a prompt, a very, very detailed prompt, just to give you an idea what it looks like. Oil painting of crystal light in the style of Erin Hansen, light and shadows, backlit trees, strong outlines, stained glass, modern impressionist, award-winning, trending on ArtStation, vivid, high definition, and high resolution. So that was fed into Stable Diffusion, and within seconds it produced 3 images. When the artist herself looked at it, she was quite impressed by the results. And as she pored over the results, she said, "Oh, wow. It looked," and she said, "I would have put it on the wall." She's one of the many of the professional artists whose work was included in the data set that was used to train Stable Diffusion. She's only one of the many artists who are really unhappy to learn that their pictures of their work were used without somebody informing them or asking for consent or paying for the use. There are a lot of concerns that are being raised by artists, and artists say that they'll risk losing their income as people start using AI-generated images based on copyrighted material for commercial purposes. But it's also a lot more personal, so to speak, because art is very closely linked to a person, and it could raise all these data protection and privacy problems. There is a coalition growing these days amongst creative industries to figure out how to mitigate this. One group in particular, it's its early days of mobilization, and this could involve pushing for new policies and regulations. And that's not just artists, it's a lot broader than that. It's photographers, models, actors, actresses, directors, cinematographers, any sort of visual professional have to deal with this particular question right now. And currently artists don't have the choice to opt either in or out of the database or have their work removed, but they're fighting back. There is a site called now Have I Been Trained, which is launched in Berlin by two artists, Holly Hendron and Matt Dryhurst, and they are this tool, the tool that they're creating, will be helpful for you to be either able to be opting in or opting out of the data sets that are used currently to train Stable Diffusion and Midjourney. And some art communities like Newsgrounds are taking really a stand and have explicitly banned AI-generated images, and DeviantArt, which is a very large art community, including digital artists, have been furious too. And I think they also went this route in taking a stand against AI-generated art. One artist that was in particularly not very impressed by AI-generated art is Grzegorz Rutkowski. Those of you who play games might even know his name because he's a very famous gaming illustrator from Poland. He's been illustrator for games like Dungeons and Dragons, very popular ones, Sony's Horizon Forbidden West. And he was told by his fans that his pieces were included into the database and helped to create new images generated by Stable Diffusion. And lo and behold, it was true. Actually, his work is a lot more popular even than Michelangelo, Pablo Picasso, and Leonardo da Vinci. You can track how many instances or how many images there are in this particular database. Rutkowski's name also features as a prompt for thousands of times in the Discord of another text-to-image generator, which is Midjourney. And he's very much concerned. On the one hand, he understands that AI is affecting lots of fields, and it's affecting science, technology, and healthcare, and it's unstoppable and inevitable. But and as he says, we will learn to adapt to the world. But right now, as much as we can, we should treat artists and different people with respect. And he believes that AI-generated art could be a future threat to his online portfolio. And for this reason, Rutkowski and many other artists are pushing for regulation to protect the data, the type of data that AI-generated art can access. Artists like Rutkowski, who can show strong similarity with their artwork and ones generated by AI systems, have a strong claim for copyright infringement, according to many lawyers. I think I'll come back to you guys. What are some of the solutions that we could see for AI-generated art and artists? And I think this is the part where it gets really important for both collectors and those of you who create AI art. How is this treated? What are the issues? What is the solution for artists? Firstly, for artists, the solution is consensual data collection. And there are tools, as I mentioned already, have been trained that are coming up, and that will be offering a way for people to opt in or out of the data sets for training. And hopefully the regulators will be okay with this, and they will follow up on that particular proposal. Also, creators might be paid for their work. That's one of the proposals too. Eric Hansen, for example, has no problem with her art being used for training AI, but she wants to be paid. If images are sold and they were that were made with these AI systems and they're trained on her work, then artists need to be compensated, even if it's fractions of the pennies. And that's possible to do with the help of smart contracts. And now we are coming to some of the thorny issues with AI, and one of them, copyright and IP violation. We know for certain that Lion database, for example, contains a lot of copyrighted content. So where is this content coming from, and how was it established? There was an independent analysis of almost 12 million samples from this data set, and that found that nearly half of the pictures contained were taken from just 100 websites or domains. The most popular domain was Pinterest, and that accounted for just over 8% from all the pictures sampled. And the next biggest sources were sites known for hosting user-generated content, like Flickr, like DeviantArt, and Tumblr. And there were also stock photo sites like Getty Images and Shutterstock. As you know, they are very much copyrighted. In other words, sources that contain copyright content, whether from independent artists or professional photographers, they were included in the database. Well, what do senior management of Stability AI think about that? Well, their stance is neutrality. Stable Diffusion founder, in particular, his name is Mostad, says that scraping public material from the web, even though it's copyrighted content, is legal both in the US and UK, though this doesn't mean legal objections won't be happening in the future. AI-generated art also poses a lot of tricky legal questions. In the UK, where Stability AI is based, scraping images from the internet without the artist's consent to train an AI tool could be a copyright infringement. That's according to lawyers. Copyrighted work can be used to train the AI systems under the so-called fair use, but only for non-commercial purposes. With Stable Diffusion, Stable Diffusion is free to use, but they also sell premium access to the model through their different platform, and that could be copyright infringement. I'm not saying it will be, but it could be. A professor of law, Michael Murray, he's a professor of law at the University of Kentucky, has looked into this issue of AI-generated art in a lot of detail, and he came up with 3 reasons why AI-generated art might fail the copyright test. And that's firstly, I'm not again saying it will, but it might. If the expression of generative works is randomly created, it may be viewed as not having been used by the creative act of a human author. So to be copyright, there needs to be a human author involved. The expression of generative art might be designed and created by a human, even if machines and algorithms do the actual rendering of the expression. So again, must be decided by a human. Generative art produced by AI may be viewed as having no human author because the AI, not a person, conceived of and created the expression. The farther generative art moves away from human conception and creation, the less likely the work will be held to be copyrightable. Also, another interesting little thing that Professor Murray doesn't talk about, but text commands, the way AI images are created, they're not considered copyright. So think very carefully if you decide either to produce AI-generated art or be a collector of such art. Another issue is really unfiltered content. With stable diffusion, it's easy to use the model to generate imagery that's violent or sexual, that depicts public figures and celebrities, or that mimics copyrighted imagery from the work of small artists to big corporations, of course. But there are restrictions that are put in place by stable diffusion. There are filters that stop users from using illegally generated content or content which is overly political or violent imagery and so on and so forth. But it's actually very easy to remove these filters. In fact, if you go to subreddit, you will find instructions of how to very quickly remove these filters. Stable diffusion makes it a lot easier to generate content like that, including pictures featuring real people. Sure, the model's open source license forbids people from using the software for, say, exploiting or harming or attempting to exploit and harm minors in any way. But it is still anyone who can download stable diffusion to their computer. Well, there are practically no technical constraints on what they can use the software for. Again, if you ask senior management, well, they think it's ultimately the people's responsibility as to whether they're using the software in ethical, moral, and legal ways, how they operate the technology. And they don't believe that this issue is really a huge one. And another issue that needs to be probably taken into account, if you are a creator, well, for an AI art model, the data set is art. Much of the fine art in the world is dominated by white Western artists. And if you look at the history of art, most of art is actually European, not just Western. So that even limits it down even further. And that leads to AI-generated images that look very Western. AI bias is a notoriously difficult problem. We have this not just in art, and just in every aspect where you use AI, there is a lot of bias. And left unchecked, algorithms can perpetuate racist and sexist biases, and that bias extends to AI art as well. Just as an example, if you take DALL-E, that would spit up images of white men if you ask them in the prompt to come up with images of lawyers, right? And if you want images of flight attendants, there will be all women. OpenAI, of course, are very much aware of this problem. They're trying to fine-tune the model and try to weed out all these biases and stereotypes. Some models outside of the US fare better. That's one that's been designed by Baidu. They do a lot better job at generating images that are more culturally relevant to their place of origin, but they come with their own biases. And in particular, these models are very good at producing anime art, but less so, or actually they refuse to make images of the Tiananmen Square. A good question, and that's the question that really excites me the most of all of that, is how much art is AI-generated art? It's worth noting that all AI is only backward-looking. They can only look at the past, and then they can make sort of a prediction of the future. And because AI is backward-looking, it's only able to make variations of images it has seen before. That's why if you ask an AI model to create an image of a plate sitting on top of a fork, even though it should understand all the words and how they're arranged, the model has never seen before an image of a plate on top of a fork. So it will come up with images of forks on top of plates. What are the consequences of all of that? Well, it cannot create breathtaking, path-breaking, iconoclastic art that's category-defining or changing the course of history. Let me illustrate that with another image that I want to share with you. It's a picture by Kazimir Malevich. I'm sure you've seen this before. It's the very popular, very a kind of iconic piece of art. It's called the Black Square. There are many, many ways you can interpret this piece of art. It's abstract art with no objects, basic color, basic form. It's a void. It's a basis for a new stage in art. And if you know the predecessors of Malevich, these were mostly Impressionists and Post-Impressionists. It's an apotheosis of form and color, the end of classical art. That's how you can interpret that as well. And Malevich himself made his intention very clear. He wanted to completely abandon depicting reality and instead invent a new world of shapes and forms. And in his book, The Non-Objective World, he wrote that in the year 1913, trying desperately to free art from the dead weight of the real world, I took refuge in the form of the square. That's how the square, the Black Square, was created. Malevich called his new abstract approach to painting suprematism. And suprematism is all about the supremacy of color and shape in painting. And by sticking to these simple geometric shapes and limited range of colors, he could focus on the painting itself and not be distracted by representing a scene or a landscape or a person. Black Square was placed up high up on the wall when it was first exhibited. This position might mean nothing to anyone who's not non-Russian viewer today, but it is the same sacred spot that a Russian Orthodox icon of a saint would sit in a traditional Russian home. So everything is symbolic. The picture is symbolic. The square is symbolic, and the place, the way it was positioned in its first exhibition was symbolic too. Now, probably let me stop sharing this. Because I would just want to consolidate and offer some concluding thoughts. I think that AI is just a tool. It's like a pencil, like a camera, and the criterion should be, is it good or bad art? And according to some art critics who looked into it, Jerry Salt is a famous art critic, he considers it pretty crappy. No imagination or creativity. And sure, while AI-generated art tools might cause the role of the artist to change, it's not going to erase the artist and their art. That's according to some artists themselves. Well, it also raises the question of value. It could even become more valuable, artists' genuine creations, because you could imagine human art being this artifact that is hard to find and even pretty highly priced. Computer-generated art would not be so highly valued. I actually agree with that. Some artists are saying that they are not threatened by AI tools because while they're experimenting with them, they stress that they cannot be replicated in their work. They cannot convey the emotions of the creative process. And at this point in history, probably a sort of non-biased position would be, you can't fight it, you can't fight AI, so learn and adapt. AI combines and assembles. It's a remix of what has been done before, so it cannot create category defining or innovative art. At best, it's a well-executed derivative art. No Malevich or El Greco or Paul Cézanne, and they were categories of their own, just these couple of artists. So what is the currency of the future if you look at the world of art with all these machines and software coming in? Well, I think ideas. And I would like to conclude this with some thoughts from Maxim Cantor, who is an artist, educator, author, and philosopher of art. He was saying that in relation to Leonardo da Vinci. All visual artists, even though unconsciously, express an idea through their craft. Craft is a reflection, clarification of an idea. Through their work, artists assert an ideal. Art becomes a gospel, or to put it bluntly, an ideology. So art is ideology, good art is. And it's not clear to me what idea or ideal AI-generated art imposes as its secondary derivative art. Is this a collection of ideas from all the images that AI has been trained on? It's a very, very good question to ponder. And I invite you to think about this question too. Well, anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a great pleasure to share some pieces of art, work of my own, and some thoughts on AI generated art. See you next time, next Friday at 2 p.m. Dubai time.